First of all, could you just introduce yourself and tell me your name and what you do?
My name is Janice Alexander, and I'm a housewife.
Very great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
My name is Franca Bellamo Di Loretto, and I'm a real estate agent.
I'm Maggie Ader. I study at McGill. I'm a world religions major. I'm from Boston originally.
When I use the term mental illness or to talk about mental illness, what comes to mind for you? What does that bring? What does that bring up?
What does that bring up? First thing that pops into my head: depression. Depression.
Do you have any family or close friends or know anybody?
Yes,
with
that's
mental
why
illness?
that's the first
That's why
word
it
that
comes up.
popped into my head. Yes,
Okay.
many.
Many, yeah. Could you tell us a bit about how they've
Myself
experienced life?
included.
Yourself included.
Yeah.
Would you be comfortable talking about yourself?
Sure,
or-
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm treated for it now
Okay.
for most of my life, so yes.
What do you know about mental illness, or what does the term mean to you?
My father was diagnosed, I would say, in his late 60s, early 70s, manic depressive. So I helped him through all that. So with psychiatry and bringing him to the doctor all the time, and I learned a lot about lithium, and so that's my background with mental illness. My father.
I have a little bit of personal experience, not much, depression and anxiety. I don't know if that falls in the right category, but my dad's a doctor, and he always tells me about in his residency he was working with veterans and lots of mental illness there.
It started after I had my second baby. And I didn't recognize what it was, just overwhelming feelings of sadness, and it progressed for a couple of years until I wasn't able even to sleep anymore. So a few nights of not sleeping, after that I ran to a neighbor's and asked them to help me, to take me to the hospital, that something wasn't right. And that's how I was diagnosed, yeah.
Once we finally was diagnosed what we had, and he went on the lithium, it was fine. It saved his life because then he was very stable, and if he would ever have an episode, it was manageable. But before that, we couldn't understand what was going on.
I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was about 13, and I in the States. And the one thing my only complaints that I have is I didn't have a lot of information before then. So especially when you're growing up and you're becoming a teenager, you think these things are normal, and they're not exactly normal. So I don't know if that's really within the healthcare's realm, but I wish I had been more informed. If you're feeling like this, it's not the way things have to be.
During the 7 or 8, 9 years before you was diagnosed, were you navigating through the system, or you didn't try the system? You thought it was just part of normal life?
I'm Italian origin, so my father loved his Italian doctor, who he just adored, was a god for him, and would give him lots of natural vitamins and products. I have no idea what he was giving him. So whenever he would feel an episode and he wasn't feeling himself, he would just go see his doctor on his own. And then the episode would last maybe, I don't know, a few weeks, depending what the stress was that caused it. And then he would go up and down, phases of not sleeping, feeling paranoid a little bit.
I sat and spoke with a doctor for a little while, and they put me on medication, and I went back every week to check in, and gradually things became much better.
When we went to the hospital, that doctor finally recognized this, and I think your father has a mental illness. I suggest you bring him to the Ashland Hospital. When we brought him in there, and we convinced him to stay, which was very hard. He didn't want to stay in the hospital, and they diagnosed him, and he stayed 3 weeks. After that, it was great. We were assigned a doctor, and she was with us the whole time till he passed away.
Do you feel you've made a good recovery in these last years?
Yes, I have. I tried going off my meds because there is a stigma attached to mental illness. I don't know if depression is part of mental illness, but I believe it is. And I did try and wean myself on my own off of my drugs about 3 years ago, and sunk back down.
Right.
And went to see my doctor, and went back on, and yep, I'll never try that again.
The most important thing that I can say is to ignore the stigma. I think there's a lot of stigma surrounding mental illness, like if you're depressed, like, oh, well, that's because your life sucks or something like that. It's because you're not working hard in school, you're not good at anything. And I think that there's also a lot of stigma surrounding getting help. You don't want to be the person who goes to the therapist, you don't want to be the person on medication. And I think that I don't know, that's really a cultural byproduct rather than anything inherent about mental illness or the help you can receive for mental illness. I don't know. I think it's worth it to discard the stigma if you can.
I've been in conversations where people didn't know I was being treated for depression, and they have said a few things, and then I'll tell them I'm being treated for it for years now, and try to enlighten them a little bit. Mind if you don't hide it?
Right.
It's you're acting like you're not ashamed of it, which is nothing to be ashamed of.
Right. So it sounds like you've been making a good recovery. What factors do you think helped you? I mean, you mentioned the meds and your doctor. Is there any other factors do you think which have really...
Family and friends. Family and friends. My husband, especially. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What specifically?
Just a real great support, no judging me, listening and understanding to what I had to say and what I was feeling, being very, very understanding about it, and supportive.
I think having a good support system helps a lot. I mean, I have great parents, and especially having a dad who's a doctor, always someone to turn to and talk about. I mean, I think especially with depression and anxiety, a lot of it feels mental, but it's not necessarily. You have these feelings of like worthlessness or like panic or something, and you think it's spurring from something that you're doing, but especially having a doctor in the family, you're saying that, and he's saying to me, this is a symptom. This is a symptom of a disease. You can take medication to fix this.
How was it for you as a family member trying to support somebody? Was it difficult? Or
it was difficult because we're 4 children at home, and he was closest to me, and I was the one that seemed to have the patience and handle him. So a lot of it was on me. But it was okay.
How did you survive?
I did fine. It was okay. Yeah, because I knew how to speak to him and how to deal with him. Yeah.
And I was working over the past 3 years, which helped tremendously.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it helps tremendously with self-esteem.
Right.
Which seems to go into the pits when you're suffering from depression. So that helped tremendously.
I think knowledge helps. I learned about as much as I could about it, and a good doctor, good relationship with the doctor, that helped me.
I think my final question is, or a more comment, is that there's this new paradigm in mental health services now called the recovery paradigm, which is really trying to get people to see what you just actually said. That if you have a mental illness, doesn't mean you can't have a job, have a life, have a family.
I'm worthy of everything that everybody else is worthy of.
That's what you usually put.
Yeah, I am. So it's an illness. And my GP was the one that kind of instilled that into me. She says if a diabetic needs insulin, somebody with a mental illness needs medication. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's an illness, just like diabetes or anything else. So I found the more I talked about it, the more help I got. Never try to hide how you're feeling. If you open it up front, and you'll get a lot of help.
That's a nice last word. Yeah.
Thank you.